Welcome to Women in B2B Marketing, a show where CMOs, VPs of marketing, and all strong women leaders in B2B discuss their top tactics, strategies, and tips for building high-performing teams, leveraging trends, and ultimately rocking their marketing careers. Made by and for women, insightful for all. I'm your host and 15-year B2B marketer, Jane Serra. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Women in B2B Marketing. Super excited for today's guest. We have with us Cat Valyi, like Hawaii. I love it. She is, let me list off her accolades, folks. It's CMO at Healthcare B2B Pros, fractional CMO, co-founder of Women with Dynamic Purpose, and co-founder of OM Growth Systems, Operations Marketing Executives, host and pod host of the Shift Always Happens show. She also has over 30 years of experience in B2B healthcare marketing. So super excited to dive into every one of these aspects. And thank you for somehow carving some time out with all of these things going on to talk to us today. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I love talking about B2B marketing and all my other stuff.
You're in the right place then. I always start off just asking, you do a million things right now, which we will dive into. How did you get to the place you are today and to being CMO? What was your path to becoming CMO in a B2B space?
I actually started out in the B2C space many years ago, and it was really interesting to work directly with patients. But then later, I got into medical devices and working B2B, and I really enjoyed the space. And that's when I really started to dive into marketing and learning how to put practices in place to make an organization more efficient and more strategic around marketing. And so I just always wanted to lead marketing in the B2B space because there's something about healthcare in that I love healthcare, but I never wanted to be a nurse or a doctor or anything. But I feel like working with these companies, I'm like healthcare adjacent, where I can somehow help these organizations get their message, their solution, technology, service, whatever it is to the doctors or the hospitals that will then help the patient. Because ultimately in healthcare, there's always a through line all the way down to the patient. And I just love that space. I just really enjoyed it. And I just stuck with it. And I just wanted to go as far as I could go in healthcare, B2B marketing space. And
yeah, I love that. So you can actually feel and see that you're making a difference, right? So not as the nurse and the doctor, but you're still helping them because they need all of these things and the software and these actual physical products behind the scenes to get their jobs done. So you empower that, thus helping people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's nice.
And because I worked on the B2C side many years ago, and then later in my early 30s, my sister got really sick and eventually I had to give her a kidney. I didn't have to. I wanted to. I gave her a kidney, donated a kidney.
Wow.
So I saw how that part of the experience was and made me always, when I'm doing my marketing for a company, I always think, how is this service solution, whatever it is, going to help ultimately a doctor to help a patient? Because then you can write with a little more heart. You can write with a little more insight. So you're just not talking about stats and so on. So it always just makes me very sensitive to ultimately the patient, the people at the end of the line in healthcare, because they're always there.
Yes. Wow. First of all, kudos for donating a kidney. That process, I can only imagine what that went through, but amazing that you were able to do that for your sister. Yeah.
It's been 25 years, which is amazing because when I did all the testing for the donation, we were like a perfect match, exact match. She just really takes care of her kidney. I say my kidney.
Yeah.
that she has. She's walking around with. She takes care of it. She takes care of herself. And that's the other thing about healthcare that's really important is the responsibility that we have as patients to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, that we're knowledgeable, that we understand our part to play, and that we learn how to ask questions and be more active. And I don't know, I just in that whole space, I just
Yeah.
love it.
I love
Good
there's
doctors, bad doctors, they're all out there. When you find the good ones, it's amazing. Can change your life.
yeah. I wonder I'm seeing a trend, and this will go a little off topic, but I promise we'll come back. There's a trend towards preventative healthcare where people are being much more like monitoring their health and where
Mhm.
they can just get healthier overall so that they don't get sick in the first place. And I love that. I think there's going to like health. I don't think insurance covers a lot of that yet, but hopefully it will soon.
Yeah, and I think just as a human, you're better off taking that route because your
Yeah.
body is so efficient. But a lot of times when you're feeling pain, your body has gotten to a point where it's do something. If you focus on more preventative care, you should have your own blood pressure cuff. You should
Yeah.
always have access to all your healthcare portals and
Yeah.
understand what your numbers are. So this way, when you're taking blood tests and you can see what that all the numbers going up and down. And then I always suggest to people that as they are going throughout their day, if they're feeling a pain, if they're feeling something, they should jot it down. So this way, when you go to the doctor
Mm,
for your annual physical, which you definitely should have, you come prepared with
yeah.
information and a bunch of questions. Because you know that moment when the doctor says, "Do you have any questions?" And you're like, no,
Yeah.
because you can't remember. It's hard to remember all those
Yes.
things. Life is busy and full. And so your doctor can't know that they need to do something because a lot of times we'll blame the doctor. We'll say they didn't.
Yeah.
But if they don't know in the 20 minutes that you have with them,
Yeah.
if they don't know, if they can't physically see it, if you don't tell them, they don't know what next steps to take.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with saying this hurts and this whatever. And if they say, oh, that's nothing, you have to say, how do you know it's nothing? And then they'll say,
Mm,
maybe we'll take a test or we'll do a blood test and so on. And I learned a lot of that from my
mm,
sister who,
yeah.
because of her kidney transplant and she has lupus and all the other issues she's had, she has learned two things. Number one, she said to me always, she goes, it's okay to fire a doctor because some people you just
Mm,
don't get along with. It's okay. Fire
yeah.
your doctor. And number two, you better know your numbers and ask questions. And I
Yeah.
take that to heart because when you look at my sister, you're like, wow, you can't tell that she's had
Yeah.
any issues. But it's not that. It's just that she's very mindful. She knows how to take her medicines. She knows how to be very regimented and all this other things in order to make sure that she is staying as healthy as possible to keep her
Yeah.
kidney and also just to keep thriving. And then I follow that same pattern as well.
Yes. I hope before we get into the marketing side of things, I hope the one main takeaway is for everybody to make sure they have all their appointments in line
Yeah.
and start taking these notes. That's such a good idea. I use my, what is it, either OneNote or Keep apps on my phone. Anytime I have a marketing idea or a business idea or something, I jot it down. I never think to do that with my health. Now I'm
Yeah.
going to start doing that. That's so smart because then you just go back, search for that note, and tell
Mhm.
the doctor everything. That's so smart. Love that. The cool thing here is that you're mentioning that you can write with heart because you think of the patient's experience and everything on that side and who this is ultimately touching and impacting, right? So you're able to tell these stories. How have you been able to bring that and your perspective and your stories and bringing this heart into B2B marketing? Do you have any examples?
Oh, that's a good question. I always, when I'm asking the questions, when I'm starting to work with an organization and I ask a
Hmm.
lot of questions, and the questions are go through the process of what are the pain points for the client, which is the other B, right? What are they
Yep.
trying to do? But then I try to find out why is that important for the client, for their patient. So I always try to ask that extra step or that extra question so I can get to the heart of it. And sometimes you'll work with companies when you're working B2B and someone will say, oh, they don't care about the patient. Then that's not true. I don't care what anyone says. Ultimately, they absolutely do. Number one, that's their
Yeah.
revenue. Number two, they went to school all these years, the hospitals, everything. they do care about the patient. They do
Yeah.
care if the patient's satisfied. They do care if the experience is top notch, because all those things means that because now patients have choices. You don't have this one local doctor that everybody goes to. You can fire your doctor and you can go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else. And if an organization is not keeping their patients because they're not there, maybe their solution is making them wait too long, or their staff doesn't know how to interact with them, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
it will affect the patient. So I try to ask multiple layers of questions. So this way you can tell the story, and then sometimes I'm able to do it. Sometimes people are like, no, but
Yeah.
in my mind, as I'm writing it, whatever content or marketing plan or strategy, I'm thinking of it. So this way, hopefully it shows up somehow in the content.
Yeah. So you're asking the right questions because they think they know what they want, but actually you have to dive deeper and ask questions that get
Yeah.
underneath that surface level. Is there anything else specific so healthcare marketing, once you break in, I know it's common to stay in that space, like a lot of verticals and industries. With healthcare marketing, it's also hard to break into it if you haven't been in there from the beginning. So everyone wants like 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 plus years experience in this type of healthcare. Is there anything that's very different in healthcare that you think stands out, or something to keep in mind in regards to healthcare marketing and
Yeah,
B2B?
there's so many regulations, and it's good to know them as a marketer. So this way you're not saying things that are not wonky. You got to understand the regulations around the products and services and solutions you're working with. And especially in medical devices, if you're working in medical
Mhm.
devices, you can't promise something that you haven't proven. You can't say this is the best ever, whatever it is, if you
Yeah.
don't have data to back it up. So you
Yeah.
have to learn how to be crafty with your words when you're trying to say how great your product is without saying those words. You have to understand the regulations, and you have to understand the language, and you have to understand how you can talk about it. The other interesting thing about healthcare is how they get paid. You have the health plans, and then you have people. How do the plans get paid? How does Medicaid,
Yeah.
Medicare, all these things, you have to know a little bit about it. So when you're talking to the client, you're making sense. All the
Yeah.
audits that they do in the healthcare space and all these other things. There's just so many hurdles that are there in the healthcare space that if you understand those things, those again, what questions to ask, what kind of wording you can or can't use. You don't want to write something that gets a company in trouble. You didn't know that you couldn't
Yeah.
say whatever it was that you couldn't say. And the other thing is that you have to understand how doctors talk and how
Mm.
people within the healthcare space talk, what's important
Yeah.
to them. And because they're, again, working on two things. They're business owners, and then they're also do no harm, right? So you have to know how to talk to these folks and how to make sure that you are writing in a way that will help grow their business, but won't get them in trouble by
Yeah.
saying something wonky or something that's not true. So it's just
Yeah.
understanding that whole space. It's very complicated. It's very convoluted. And that's why people don't even understand so much about healthcare. You think it's not like an easy transaction. Like, I'm going to go get my hair done, right? So I go and I get my hair done and make my appointment. I pay the person and I leave, right? This one, imagine if you had health plans involved in getting your hair done, and then you had to submit,
Yeah.
what that was. And you had to have the right CPT code, and then you had to have the right description, and maybe your hair wasn't supposed to be cut that way. So you're like, I don't know
Yeah.
what instruments you used. And it's
Yeah.
so when you're in healthcare, you're just thinking a little differently. And it allows me, and it goes back to my questions, because when you're building a strategy, you're asking a lot of questions. And if you know the industry, what kind of questions ask and how to interact with these folks. So this way, ultimately what you write doesn't sound weird for the healthcare space.
Do you have certain go-to questions when you bring on a new client or you start at a new company? Are there a few questions that are your just solid foundational questions as you learn about the company?
It's part of my whole 3D strategic approach,
Ah.
and the 3Ds are define, design, and deploy. And when you're defining, you're trying to get clarity. And that whole clarity part is where I have a lot of questions. And they're your basic
Mm,
marketing questions. Who is your target audience? But who is your best target? Who do you
yes.
actually really sell to? And what problem do you solve? Not what you sell, what do you solve? Really understanding that. What's the pain point that you're alleviating for
Yeah.
that person? So when they use your product, service, solution, technology, they go, oh God, this is faster. This is great. I don't have to worry about this. Or
Yeah.
now we have money flowing. Or what is it that you're really trying to solve? So it's asking questions that get to the heart of the matter with regards to your service and what you're offering, who you're offering. I always think of the Maslow's hierarchy of need
Yeah.
because a lot of times people just think of the basic needs, like just the basic need. But really, what about self actualization, which is the top? Maybe who you're selling to is actually always looking for something else. What kind of
Yeah.
questions do you need to ask that person, or how much do you have to know about that target audience? So you have to really understand that. But so I have about 20 questions I try to ask folks that allow me to get a sense. And sometimes some of them are slightly redundant, but they ask a little differently just to get
Yes.
some insight to how they're thinking so I can better understand. I think the more questions, the better. Sometimes people don't want you to ask questions. They're like, oh, go to my website. But yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes the website doesn't have it all. I don't know what really is your motivation. I don't know what makes you happy
Yes.
person. I don't know what your goal is
Yeah.
and what you believe the product or services solution does. And then what does the client believe your product and
Mm-hmm.
solution does? Do they match? Are they
Yeah.
the same thing? And that's getting all that information and then doing a little deeper dive to see if those things match is usually quite interesting because sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
selling something, but really the person is actually, what is that? That whole hammer nail thing, right? People are actually trying to buy
Yeah.
something, put a hole in the wall or hang a picture, but you're selling a nail, but they're really just buying something to hang the picture.
Mhm.
So you've got to ask the right questions about that. And so I don't
Yeah.
have I have a list of 20 or so, but that's what I come, but it's to
Yeah.
get
Love it.
clarity. The more clarity I have, the better strategy I can create, the better then content and promotions I can create.
Yes. And it's so interesting you say some people respond like, oh, look on the website, but the website could be the problem that we are going to solve. So we need to extract the raw data to see what we need to change on that website. So funny. Oh, founders and C suite.
We love them.
So 3D, I want to double down on that too.
Okay.
So define, design, and deploy. We walked through define a little bit with clarity and asking the right questions. And I love that you said, I want to emphasize this too, that some of the questions are intentionally repetitive. I do the same thing when I come on and I meet with different people and when I start a new position. I give that warning so they don't think I'm not paying attention or I don't remember something, which that could happen. We're human. But I ask them, like, if I ever ask the same question a few different times, it's intentional because I want to see how things change and if it gets you in a different day or gets you thinking a different way. So I
Yeah.
love that you do that too. I'm not crazy. But
So
let's get into the define and then design and deploy. Can we walk
right.
through
And
your
then
approach here?
so define is clarity. So it's about asking
Yep.
questions and really even figuring out what your secret sauce is, what makes you different, really digging down and getting the clarity all about the client. Then the next thing is design. And actually, define has most of the work. And the define part is the part people hate the most
Yeah.
because when they're coming to marketing, they want to get to, I want these deliverables. But in order to get the deliverables, you've got to do the hard work. In order to build a strategy, you've got to do the hard work and you've got to do the define. So I always find the
Yeah.
define the most important, but it's the part people like the least. Then there's design, which is that's where you get the direction. You have clarity about what it is. Now you want to know where to go. And that's when you're actually building the strategy. Do I go left? Do I go
Mm.
right? And I always say it's like planning a trip to Florida. You call a travel agent back in the day and you say, I want to go to
Yeah.
Florida. Now, Florida is a big state. So you're getting clarity would be, do you like to swim? Do you like parks? Do you like animals? Do you just want to sleep? Are you an adventure person? That gives you the
Mm-hmm.
clarity. And then the design would be, okay, now we figured out you like amusement parks. So do you want to go to Universal? Do you want to go to Disney? And so that gives you the direction. So now you're going to design and build the strategy. And then finally, deploy is to create the action, which is that's where you get to the tactical stuff. You say, okay, I know where I want to go, but how do I get there? How do I put the steps in place? And what are the right steps? And do I have money for that? Because
Yeah.
plan.
Lately, no.
So I might have this great big plan to go to Disney, but I
Yeah.
can only go to Busch Gardens.
What to say? It's like the champagne taste on a Bud Light budget. So
There you go. So that's why I break, because everybody knows the steps to marketing. But when I break it down into 3 core chunks, I found that people found it more palatable and it's easy. And this way, I always remember I'm going to go through these steps in order to
yeah.
deploy the perfect strategy, which will have the right solutions and actions that we need to help with get to the destination.
Yeah. It's very neatly broken down. So I'm going to get a little meta here.
Okay.
How did you come across this framework, like, and identify that this is your framework? And because I'm just thinking, I feel like some people have their frameworks and it's so powerful and amazing. Did you just one day have this aha moment, or did you go back and think through past roles? What was the process in coming up with?
I actually had clarity, direction, and action. That
Mm,
was my initial thought process. And I wanted to take that and make it a little easier for folks to remember. And my thought
yeah.
was, I am trying to take marketing and make people have a different mindset and see it more holistically, as instead of this tool at the end that gives me a promotion, I want you to see it holistically, like in a 3D model. Then I was like, 3D,
Ah,
okay, how about I take clarity, direction, and action
love
and
that.
change it to define, design, deploy, and then it's 3D. So this way, it's saying that the process has some dimension around it.
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with it. So I actually had the other words first, which
Yeah.
define the 3Ds, but then the 3Ds were cool.
Yeah, I love the thought process. This is why I wanted to get behind the scenes, because it feels like a task at some point to look back at what you've done when you started a new journey. And especially if you do consulting, you have to have something to like a package and
Yeah.
something you work through, processes. So when you get into that, like thinking back and doing this, it's just cool to hear how things come to place. And I love the aha moment when you're like 3D. Best feeling when that happens.
And then it let me break up. And then when I'm selling my services, and sometimes people just want the clarity part. Do you want just the
Yeah.
define part? And then, or do you want just the define and design? Or do you just want to deploy, but you better have that other stuff
Yeah.
available for me? I need that stuff in order
Yeah.
to make it happen.
Yeah, it's so organized. It's a great way to split it up. Very cool. So this, I imagine, helps with a lot of your fractional work too.
Yeah. Initially, when I was working in corporate, I was always doing a lot of things, even if it was for one company. But I just love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're doing a lot of things and you just
Yeah.
have to be organized. I would be working with organizations and I'd be the lone marketer when I first started out. And I had all these salespeople calling me, and everyone had the best marketing ideas. Everyone
Yeah.
was wanted this and that. And I was like, okay, this is crazy because there's no organization here. So it became very clear to me that I had to have a process in place and force the salespeople into the process in order to make sure that I could deliver for them. So if we're doing a trade show, I knew what the strategy was based on where the company was going, what messaging we were going to do, what kind of product and solutions and services. So I knew that for this trade show or these type of trade shows, this is the kind of messaging package we were going to do. And we're not going to deviate because we have to make sure that everybody is saying the same thing. When a
Mhm.
salesperson would call, I would send them a form to fill out. Drove them nuts at first, but I would send them a form. So this way, when I got it back, I was like, we're not going to do this brand new. We already had this. We already know how to
Mhm.
do, this is the messaging we're going to do. And so it made them a little more invested in the process. So
Mm.
doing a lot was always interesting to me. And when I left corporate, and the funny thing is that when I left corporate, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I decided to view myself as a corporation. I said, what if I'm Catco, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Why don't I just use my 3D strategic approach on me? And I sat down and I did the whole process.
Wow.
And that's when I found out two things. I said, number one, I do want to stay in healthcare, but I don't want to help super large corporations because a lot of times they've already got their stuff together or they're going to out, whatever. I want to work with smaller organizations that are struggling with their marketing, that need some insight, that need help, and that want to learn how to talk about their brand in a different way. So this way it's not like everybody else, that it's unique to them. Okay, that's when I started to do the fractional CMO. So when I work with an organization, I could go in and be their fractional CMO for whatever time, and usually it's contracted for a certain amount of time. But the
Yeah.
other thing I learned about myself is that as I was doing my self journey, I started to go to all these organizations, these women organizations that were wonderful, very inspiring, but I'm a tactical and strategic person. So,
Yes.
as much as I like to be inspired, I need inspiration with a roadmap attached to it. I co founded Women with Dynamic Purpose with my friend. We were talking about how we couldn't find these organizations that we liked. And we decided if we can't find a thing, let's make the thing. And
Yeah.
that's how we came up with Women with Dynamic Purpose, because we love the thought of, as women, as you're getting older, because when I left corporate, I was 51. And
Hmm.
already you could feel ageism creeping up behind. You got menopause. People are making fun of it.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about age in a very negative way. You start to feel like it's, maybe no one says it to you, but you start to feel that, oh, I've got to start wrapping things up. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I have so many things I want to do, and I
Yeah.
can't sit still. I have to keep moving until I can't keep moving. So we wanted women that had this dynamic purpose, that were always moving, that are want to do more, and that don't want to be defined by a number, but want
Yeah.
to be defined by the things that they've created and contribute in society. So that's the whole thing about Women with Dynamic Purpose, was how to help women do the 3D strategic approach, help them define, design, and deploy
Oh,
their process, help
cool.
them understand we also say with purpose, path, and community. So the 3D strategic approach helps you get your purpose and path, but then also build a community of support. So this way you're not feeling alone. And then
Yeah.
that kind of, we wrote a book, we co-wrote a little book during the pandemic called
Yeah.
Shift Always Happens,
Yes.
and which is a great little roadmap book. I love it. And I'm going to rewrite that book and add more content to it, because over the years, and then I turned that into a podcast because I wanted to be able to keep talking to women. And this is just me talking to women and giving them
Yeah.
thoughts and insights about, and it's a short podcast, maybe like 8-10 minutes of
Oh,
burst
cool.
information, and just to let them know that you don't have to fall back or step back if you don't want to. You don't have to retire if you don't want to. If you want to do something new, you can, but you got to remember that a lot of times it's your inner voice that is taking direction from the outside.
Yeah.
And once you learn that your inner voice doesn't have to be directed by the external inputs,
Yes.
it changes how you see what you can do next. So the
Okay.
world could be calling you old, the world could be saying whatever, but if you're saying whatever, you're going to just stay focused and keep moving forward.
Yeah. I love that. I'm definitely going to go buy this book. I bet everybody's looking it up right now as they're listening. It's making me think of, I'm a big Mel Robbins fan and I listen to her all the time. And she said something, or one of her recent episodes on her podcast was saying something about how if you change if you change how you speak to yourself, your whole life changes.
It
So
really
if
does.
you're and you start to see things like she has this thing where if you look for hearts, you'll start to see them everywhere. And it's the same when you're pregnant, you suddenly see pregnant women everywhere,
Yes.
babies everywhere. So if you put these things that you fixate on into like you change what you're fixated on into what you want for yourself and what you want to bring into your life, all of a sudden you'll start seeing it. Like
Yeah.
that.
I have this presentation that I give to places that it's called 3 Steps to Getting Your Shift Together. And I
Love it.
also have a free ebook for the same title. I'm going to give you my link tree and
Yeah.
that'll have it on there.
Thank you.
The whole thing is about, or one of the components about it is learning how to find out if your inner voice is a Debbie Downer. And you can figure that out by every time you make a mistake, what words do you use? Do you say to yourself, no big deal, and you move on? Or are you calling yourself dumb, stupid, you can't believe it, and you're hanging on to it and reliving it and thinking about how you could have done it better? Or are you just letting it go? And a lot of times we spend so much time in the rearview mirror trying to fix something that you can't possibly fix. That you spend and waste time doing that, as opposed to saying, I just fell on my face. Now what? And then move on. Because I tell people this all the time. I don't care how much you think about it and wish, you're not going to turn back time. Don't waste time on it. If you want to look back in life for memories that make you happy or for learning, that's fine. But if it's to beat yourself up, you're wasting your time. And that inner voice, if you don't get that inner voice, then your confidence will be dimmed. And then you'll start second guessing yourself. And then you just won't be able to see a path forward, because that's the whole thing. The interesting thing is with your mindset, if you start to say to yourself that you are super smart, nothing's going to stop you, you're going to get deals and people are going to find you, your subconscious does that thing, what you were saying with Mel Robbins, you see heart, you'll see opportunities. If you say there are none for people my age, you will not see anything. And if you want, I'll tell you a story about somebody I coached. Okay.
That was going to be my next question. Okay. So yes, let's do it.
She was turning 61 at the time. She was such a loyal employee. Every company she worked with, she stayed for as long as possible. And she was staying with this company, but they were moving to another state and they were not taking her with them. Now, she didn't particularly want to go, but she did want to be asked, but they didn't. But then she was like, I'm 61. I'm never going to get another job. And I said, okay, let's step back and let's start with your accomplishments. And I love, and I'm a true believer of writing an accomplishments list regularly. You write it down of all the things you've done. And if you sit back and start thinking about it, and you don't have to do it all at once, because sometimes you won't remember. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to start remembering, you're like, oh yeah, I did that. And you write it down. Oh yeah, I did that. You're going to suddenly say, and this is what she said, holy crap, I did all that. And I was like, yes. I was like, you did all that. Then I said, how do we take every one of these things you did and turn them into how you helped the company you were working with? And then you learn how to say and talk about your accomplishments differently. They're not just things you did. They're things that helped the company do something. It helped the company save money. It helped the company grow. It helped the company use their employees better, whatever it is. It's really learning how to reframe all of your accomplishments in a way that you can then turn those things into, when you're talking in an interview, you can say, they'll say, what are your accomplishments? You're not going to just list all these things. You're going to say, I helped so-and-so do this by doing this, which helped them make this much money. And finally, we practiced interviewing and we practiced learning how to talk about herself with confidence, because she kept saying, oh, I did that because it was my job. And I said, I know that, but the point is that you did it well. And you should be very proud of that, because some people can't do that. Maybe they can do something else, but they didn't do what you did. And what you did for the learning how to talk differently and understand that. So she went on a couple of interviews. The first couple of interviews, she started out really strong, and then she would back up, not wanting to brag, because that's just not the way she was. We practiced. Finally, she got a great job, more money, close to her house. She couldn't believe it. The people are nice. She's still working there
Yeah.
now, and she loves it.
Wow.
Yeah. And it all happened because she really had to change. She had to take her Debbie Downer, throw it out,
Yes.
learn to look at her accomplishments, and then learn how to articulate them in a way that, with confidence. And
Yes.
I love that story.
Yeah. The
She's doing,
power of your mindset. It's
it's
great. And having
amazing.
a support system too to get you
Yeah.
in that mindset. I forget where this came from. It is not a Jane original, I wish, but they're calling your inner critic, like naming her or him or whoever. But for instance, I have not named mine yet, but if it was Karen, so when you hear that negative talk in your head or you hear something like negative and berating yourself, you say, shut up, Karen.
Yeah.
And you separate it from, like you're saying, like you drop the Debbie Downer, you separate it from yourself. So you no longer trust it and you show Karen who's boss.
Yes. Yes. And it's the interesting thing is people say, oh, I can't get that voice out of my head. You have to then talk louder than it, out loud, and say, I'm
Yes.
great. When I was 18 in college, I had to do a book report. And I left it to the last minute. And then my roommate said, oh, here's a book. It was, my dad gave me this book. He was a preacher or something. And it was self-love. And I don't even know who wrote it. It was a tiny book. I read it overnight. And I was like, this book is pretty good. It was all about how to love yourself, but it wasn't about bragging or whatever. And it was my first taste of that thought process, which kind of stayed in the back of my mind, but I thought about it for a long time. And then later in my years, and I would say I started to then think about it again. And then I started to do more research. I started to read Deepak Chopra, and I started to read just a whole host of other people, and learning how to understand and tap into my mindset and learn how to love myself, which took a long time. Even though I was doing the work, it took a long time for me to really look at myself and say, I'm pretty darn good. And that's okay. You can say that, and you can be confident about how you feel about yourself. You may not walk around the town saying, hey, look at me, I'm great.
Yeah.
But to yourself, if you can't look in the mirror and say, you're pretty awesome, then you're going to allow other people to then say things, and then that becomes your narrative, and your voice has to be louder.
Wow, because you're leaving room for other people's narratives and your Karen or your inner voice kind of creeping in to make that narrative for you. That's fascinating. I love being louder than your inner voice and others. Really good reminder. Is there any trends from working with various women and women, probably women from all walks of life? Is there any trend that you see like most common that they come to you with, a blocker for us typically?
I think it has confidence, because a lot of times as you get older, you're confident, which is weird because women in their late 40s, 50s, 60s have so much knowledge, right? So much insight, so much experience. But people are trying to attach wrinkles, gray hair, menopause to that in a ball. Okay, you're not 20 anymore, but let me tell you, there are studies that show women, either they're too young or too old. There's no Goldilocks, because you're too young.
Nothing
you don't know
fits.
things, and you might get pregnant. So we don't want to invest in you. And then the other way is you're too old. You're not going to be innovative. But a lot of that has to do with our language. We have to be careful as we get older. And this is one of the things I tell women all the time with their confidence. Your confidence will change when you stop. It's that damn inner voice again. Stop adopting the language of being old. I'm not saying pretend that you're not getting older, because I think getting older is a super great gift, because that's everybody's trajectory and that's everybody's hope. Long life, long life.
True.
But you then have to stop saying, oh, I'm not going to learn that. That's for the millennials. Or, oh, I did that already. I'm never going to do that again. Or I can't do that. My elbow hurts. Oh, I'm so old. Why? You have to take that language, because when you put that language out there, what you're saying is, hey, world, you now have permission to talk to me and think about me that way, because you've given the world permission. Once you talk about yourself in a certain way, the world says, oh, she's all right with that. Let's call her old, decrepit. Let's make fun of her and all this other stuff. So I think that women, their confidence gets boosted when they stop buying into the ageism. I know it's out there. And we have to fight it as a society.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you have to take that language on. You don't talk about yourself like you're old. If you have menopause,
Yeah.
crap. I'd like to see a man sit on a heated pad that goes up to 100 degrees and every now and then in the conference, just crank that thing up. Listen, it's biology. You would say to yourself, damn, I can't believe she's doing that while she's doing all the work, while her innards are burning because menopause is no joke.
Yeah. So crazy.
So I think a lot of it is confidence, and then tapping into your youthful energy, not trying to be young, but the youthful energy that makes people want to talk to you, right? That makes people want to engage, that makes people look at you and say, oh, this person knows stuff. It's not just past information. So what you have to do then is be open to new ideas, learn the AI, learn what's happening in social media.
Yeah.
Don't tell me, I don't know that TikTok stuff.
I know. That was the first thing I thought when you said that. I was like, I definitely said that's for the youngin'.
Just change how you say it. Just say, I don't go there. That social media is not for me. I use these. But when you tie youth to it, you're saying, I'm old, the youth go. So it's just, you got to change how you talk about it.
Fascinating.
It really changes how then people respond to you about it.
Yeah, because you're talking about the language you use. So language you use with yourself. We say often I say this all the time, like at home and work, but words matter, right? The words you choose matter. Also in this context, like what you're saying to yourself. And I never even thought joking about Gen Z on TikTok, oh, it's not for me, is putting that dichotomy in place, right? Like it's not for me. So I must be on the older side then. And wow, I never thought about that. That's so interesting.
Because there's a lot of ageism out there. People will be more than happy to tell you how old you are. And I always tell people, maybe you're old, but I'm not. I'm 61. That's my age. And I always try to take the old out of it. I just say my number. It's my number. I can't help it. That's when I was born.
So crazy. And you're right. It's like it's your damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. It always makes me think, this is going back to cosmetic stuff, but Sarah Jessica Parker, and if you think of Sex and the City, that cast, right? It's like Sarah Jessica Parker seemingly hasn't had a ton of work done and people hate on her for it, right? They're like, oh, look how much older she's gotten and like all her wrinkles. Okay, that's called life. That happens. And then on the other side, there's the character who plays Charlotte. She had some done and people rip her apart for having that work done. It's okay, which one do you do?
I know, really. And the funny thing about that show, and I love Sex and the City, and I tried to watch this newer series, but these women, when the new series came out, they were like in their 50s, 55.
Yeah.
Listen to their language. They spend 50% of the time talking about how old they are. That's all they say. That's I was like, I can't watch this. I don't understand and I get it. You got creeks, you got this, you do things differently. It's like, I can't run a mile. Okay, I'm going to walk a mile. But that doesn't mean I'm going to say, I'm old, I can't walk. I could not watch the show because they spend so much time talking about how old they were. It was, and I was like, don't you guys got other things to talk about? Talk about something else. Because I thought it was going to be, because their original show, they're sassy, they're whatever, these women are doing whatever. And then they get into this second phase. I thought, oh, they're going to just keep going and showing women, I got this.
How to rock it in your 60s. Yeah.
I'm like, well, then if she's going to spend her time talking about how old she is, why is she dressing like that? Why don't you just wear a muumuu and some slippers and to call it a day? I don't understand the writing. And when something does not align with me, I was like, sorry, I can't watch it. I'll just watch the old shows.
This is blowing my mind because there was something about the show, like I haven't finished watching, I don't think even the first new season, but now that you say that, I wasn't even aware, like cognizant of it. But now that you're saying it, I'm thinking of all these moments in every episode. They do talk about it nonstop. that like their age and their limitations. And that's crazy.
Why would you then be surprised when everybody is talking about you like you're old and you're like, oh, that's supposed to said you're old. You say you're old. You talk about you're old all day long. They opened a permission structure that just really went a different direction with the dialogue.
Yes, I am tripling down here on taking from you how much words matter. Like I always say this to my husband, like words matter, but this is just a whole new level for me. And I am also an SVU avid watcher, addicted. But this is making me think of on the stand, right? It's when the lawyers are there arguing. If one side brings up something, it's fair game for the other side. So it's making me think of that. If you bring something up, you're bringing it up for your own negative inner voice. And then for others to say, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to joke, quote unquote, about this and play into this narrative. Fascinating. I'm going to be so hyper aware of this now all the time. You must be already.
You're like, I see it all the time. I'm like, they need to cut that out.
Wow. Yeah. So crazy. Wow. Thank you for enlightening me on this side of things. I'm going to be so careful of like things I put out there, right? Because I think some of it starts as self-deprecation, right? But there's a line that you just don't want to cross there.
Right.
And certain things to steer clear of.
You have a friend and you guys have a conversation and you guys always do have at it. I'm just saying that you've got to watch how you put let's take it back to marketing, right?
Yeah.
How you talk about your product. How are you going to make your logo? Is your logo neat and clean? And because it represents something. So you are a brand, right? If you think of yourself as a brand and you say to yourself, my brand is old and decrepit and she can't learn and she's never going to amount to anything. That's the brand. That's your brand. But if your brand is sharp, I'm getting older. So what? I'm still creating. I'm still powerful. Look at all this information. Change your brand. Think of yourself as a brand because you would never do that for a company. You would never talk and go on a stage and talk about your company like it's crap. Oh, this product is pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why would you do that for you? Because you are a brand. And if you don't define your brand, other people will define your brand for you. And then they'll just run with it. So you better be in control of that.
I love this. There's so much to write down on my sheet. If anyone watches the video, it's like nonstop life notes. Your brand. So if you don't define your brand, someone else will for you. Love that. It's fascinating to me how being a marketer and also loving just self-improvement and reflection, all of this, like these are my two loves. In addition to my husband and my son, I'm loving the connection that you made with the 3D framework. So having like using it for marketing and then having this epiphany, okay, I need to figure out what I want to do next. Let me 3D myself. And you did it for yourself. And now you bring that to other women as they make their shifts and changes in life and figure out their next step. That is beautiful to me. Just the connection, how you can see that working on both parallels. It's so cool.
That's why they work together. That's why I have my marketing and then I have this other part that eventually as I transition and I get older, I may just focus on women, but that's later on. But I just think it's so important that women learn how to really embrace and learn how to manage their inner voice, gain their confidence, and then just keep saying, I'm going to create. I'm not going to retire. I'm going to just figure out what's next. I just want to keep doing what I want to do because some people do want to stop working, but maybe you can start and do that thing you always wanted to do. Maybe it's painting, maybe it's sewing, maybe it's knitting, maybe it's traveling the world.
Yeah. We need to retire the word retire because when are you ever really retired? You just change what you're doing and what you're focused on.
You need a reason every day to get up in the morning. You need a reason. And because if you don't, and I've seen it with older folks, that when they don't have a reason, they're confused when they get up. What am I doing? What am I doing here? And it's very sad.
Yeah.
You need to have a reason to get up in the morning, and that could be your garden, that could be your grandkids, that could be starting a new company. It doesn't matter what your age is. Just do it.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how long we have. So just keep
Mm-hmm.
doing and
Mm-hmm.
enjoying and contributing. And maybe you're the next Grandma Moses to start painting at 80 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You don't know because if you stand still, if people tell you at 50, just stepping back, and you live to your 100, what did you do those 50 years?
Yeah.
Wait?
Yeah.
For what? Just keep
Mm-hmm.
contributing. Just keep making stuff happen. Just keep
Yes.
laughing and enjoying life. And make
Yes.
sure you don't fall into the ageism trap and brand yourself in a way that people can't see that you are still someone that can contribute.
Yes. I feel like we need a standing ovation, but it's just me that you can see right now. But it's just so well said. And it's making me rethink a lot of things right now. Cause it's just fascinating that people, like when you retire, quote unquote, like that you can't do something else. You're always like revisiting and what can you do? What can you start and building, keep creating. And like you said, have that reason to get up and motivate in the morning. It's just, yeah, claps all around. So my last question is typically, what would you tell your quote unquote younger self just getting into the workforce, right? Like 30, 35 years ago, getting into marketing and healthcare. I feel like we touched on so many life advice notes. So it might be something we already said. That's totally fine. What one thing, if you could leave yourself just getting started in marketing with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think I would have made a few more pivots in my career. I was very loyal to a lot of companies, and I think that I should have pivoted more to go into a lot of different companies, but it was a
Mm,
confidence thing. So my advice to my younger self was to build my confidence sooner so I could make a few more
mm,
pivots in my career. So maybe I could have become VP earlier
yeah.
so I could have helped more companies.
Yes. Yes. I was listening to Kyle Lacey today on a Pavilion chat. He's amazing. I would love for him to be my boss one day. But he mentioned working on your job and your career at the same time and not
Yeah.
letting your job take up all the time because you have to think bigger picture, right? Because the
Yeah.
company is one piece on your journey.
Yeah. But I will tell you, one of the things I always did very well when I went into an organization, the first thing I would do was make a path for myself. For myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't wait for them to make a path for me. I would say,
Good.
how would I get? But I was always thinking in the company, a path in the company, which was very good because I always made the path that I wanted to make. I always said, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I want to become direct. But then what I should have done was said, give myself a time limit. And then I could have made that same path by going somewhere else, and which would
Yeah.
have shortened, I think, my trajectory to get to VP. And
CMO.
yeah.
Yeah. Really good advice. Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you for staying a little bit later. I appreciate your
Oh, you're
time.
welcome. This was such a great
I would say,
conversation. Let me just
yeah,
go all over the place. So I was happy
I
because
love
I
it.
love
I
talking about
do.
both.
Yes. So that's my favorite thing to do on this show is let the conversation go where it needs to. I would say you need to write a book, but you did. So we will link it in the comments, but write another one. I'm definitely going to tune into your show. There's just so much. I always say whenever I get goosebumps on a show, I'm like, that's how I know it's a really good episode. I got that a couple times. So
Oh, good. Thank
I'm
you.
excited. Thank you for enlightening us. And sometimes it's great to take a break from pure marketing talk. So
Yeah.
thanks for working on both sides with us. And thank you again for joining the show, Kat.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And anyone who wants to tune in and to connect with you, please DM you on LinkedIn or where else can they find you and
Yeah,
listen
you
to
can
you, hear you?
on LinkedIn. I have my link tree link
There you
there,
go.
and that's the best way. And I'll give you also my link tree if you put it in notes
Oh, perfect.
somewhere. And that has all my links. And you can get in touch with me
Awesome.
either for marketing or if you're a woman with dynamic purpose, let's definitely connect.
Love it. You could be a guest on Cat's show and this will come full circle. Awesome. Thank you for joining. And thank you everybody for listening today and tuning in. Connect with Cat for sure. Reach out. I'll put all the links we talked about in show notes. And again, if you like the show, rate the show, review the show, share with a friend. All the love we appreciate gets us in front of more folks in B2B. So thank you all.